Kausalya, overwhelmed with grief, could not utter a word when Vasishtha broke the sad news to him. He deeply mourned for his father and remained mute for a while. Vasishtha condoled with him to perform the last ceremony of his father, whereupon he went to the river Gaya and performed the ceremony. Kausalya, Sumitra, Vasishtha, and other people persuaded Rama to return to Ayodhya and take charge of the kingdom when he said, I am always true to my promise, faithful to my wife, and of a firm resolution. I cannot therefore break the promise given by me to my mother Kaikeyi in fulfillment of the promise given by my father to her and return to Ayodhya under any circumstances. Bharat said, if you do not come to Ayodhya, I will go somewhere else and pass my days there until you return to my city. Rama, stroking his head, replied, Bharat, do not be disheartened. I shall return to Ayodhya in 14 years and 14 days, and I therefore wish you to go back to the city and rule there on my behalf. Bharat said, I am very glad to obey you, but I shall not feel there well without your company. So I therefore beg that you will kindly let me go to Nandigram and stay there for 14 years and 14 days. Rama replied, if you will not be happy in Ayodhya in my absence, I shall let you go to Nandigram. But, said Bharat, if you do not return from the forest within 14 years and 14 days, I shall commit suicide. Rama, having been pleased with his brotherly feelings, gave him his padukas and sent him to Nandigram, where he lived as a jogi for 14 years and 14 days. Rama also gave his padukas to Shatrughna and bade him to go to Ayodhya and rule there on his behalf. Shatrughna returned to Ayodhya with Kausalya, Sumitra, and all other people who accompanied him. A few days after he had left for Ayodhya, the Brahmans who lived at Chitrakuta said, Rama, your wife is very handsome and attractive. If you stay here with us any longer, the demons will come here and devour all of us. We are informed that the demons Trishira, Khur, and Dushan will shortly come here to carry off your Sita. We therefore request you to leave this place at once. Rama replied, you need not be afraid. Let all the demons on earth come here. I shall kill them all and defend you. The Brahmans, having no faith in what Rama had said, left the hills with their wives and children. Soon after, Rama removed to the Dandakaranya, and on his way to the forest he killed the demon called Viradha. Viradha was a Gandharv called Tumbar. One day, Kuber having called him in his presence to sing for him, the demigod got tipsy and went before him. Kuber got enraged at his conduct and cursed him, saying that he would be a demon and would wander in the forest for 10,000 years, but that he would be released from the curse when he would be killed by the hands of Rama. As appointed, the Gandharv was killed by Rama and released from the curse. Rama spent 13 years with Sita and Lakshmana in visiting holy places. And during his pilgrimage, he visited the abode of Atri, a Brahman, where he worshipped the three-headed god Dattatreya. Thence, he went and visited Agasti, a very powerful rishi. The story of the power of the rishi is as follows. There lived three demons called Atapi, Vatapi, and Alva. They were blessed by the god Shiva with the art of enchantment by means of which they devoured the innocent Brahmans. Vatapi became food and Alva water. Atapi became a benefactor and invited every Brahman to partake of the food and water. The Brahman came, and as soon as he ate the food and drank the water, Atapi cried aloud the names of Vatapi and Alva, who, having responded to the call of their brother, tore off the body of the Brahman and came out. Thus, they killed every Brahman and ate his flesh. One day, Agasti was invited by Atapi to partake of the food and water. The rishi complied with his invitation, and as soon as he ate the food and drank the water, Atapi cried out loud as usual the names of his brothers. But to his great surprise, they did not respond to his call. As the rishi burned Vatapi in his stomach, Alva, who had escaped from the belly of the rishi, and his brother Atapi assumed different forms and began to run away when the rishi cut off the head of Atapi. Alva escaped and mixed himself with the ocean when Agasti drank of the whole ocean and killed the demon. Rama stayed with Agasti for a month, and during his stay there he presented him with an arrow to kill Ravana. From the Dandakaranya, Rama set out for Panchavati. On the road, he saw a huge bird called Jatayu, who asked Rama who he was. I belong to the solar race, replied Rama, and I am son of the king Dashratha. I am called Rama. I am son of Kasha, said Jatayu, and the name of my uncle is Suparna, and I am called Jatayu. Your father was my great friend. I helped him during the battle which he had fought with Shukra, and therefore he called me his brother. Having embraced Jatayu, Rama proceeded on his journey and reached Panchavati, where he lived with Sita in a Parnakutika built by Lakshmana. Lakshmana gathered fruits and kandamulas for Sita and Rama, which they ate and passed their days there. He guarded the hut every night for fear of the demons, and he himself remained without food. One day, Lakshmana went near a thicket to collect fruits and kandamulas, where he saw a deadly khadag descending from above. The weapon fell where he was standing, and it having looked sharp and powerful, he tried it on the thicket, but to his great astonishment, the thicket was cut into two parts, and there flowed a large quantity of blood. Lakshmana was afraid that he killed some ascetic while meditating in the thicket, and in order to satisfy himself about it, he immediately went to Rama with the khadag and informed him of what had happened. When Rama said, Brother, do not be afraid. The blood which flows through the thicket is of a demon called Shabari. This demon is the son of Shurpanaka, a sister of Ravana. He was meditating in the thicket unobserved with a view to get the weapon from Shiva. The god had sent the weapon for him. If the weapon had gone to the hands of the demon, he would have annihilated the whole of the universe with it. Thank God that you have got it, and I tell you to take a particular care of it. Lakshmana was glad at this information and cheerfully attended to his duties. On the day Shabari was killed by Lakshmana, Shurpanaka found in her dream that some calamity had befallen her son, and having been awakened, she, accompanied by four demonesses, immediately started for the forest to look for her son. She wandered in the forest and at last came to the thicket, and seeing the blood there, she searched the whole wood and at last found that her son was cut into two pieces. As soon as she saw her son, she fainted and cried violently for him. The other four demonesses condoled with her, and immediately after they burned the body of Shabari and went in search of the enemy who had killed the demon. They traced Lakshmana from his footprints, and in order to revenge the killing of her son, Shurpanaka formed herself into a beautiful damsel, and taking with her the four demonesses, who had also formed themselves into a very good maid servants, she went to Lakshmana and said, I have traveled all over the earth in search of a husband, but I have not found a young man as beautiful as yourself. I have become mad after you, and unless you consent to marry me, I shall not live. I therefore implore you to take me for your wife. Do not you see how I look? Can you get elsewhere a quite young girl like me? Lakshmana was not at all captivated with her charms, but She having much insisted upon his giving her an answer, he replied, I have got my brother and sister-in-law. There they live in a hut. I cannot do anything without their consent. I shall go to your brother, said the demoness, and get a letter from him consenting to our match. So saying, she went to Panchavati with her maidservants and said to Rama, I like your brother from the bottom of my heart. I have made up my mind to marry him, and he has also promised me to take me for his wife, subject to your approval of the match. I therefore pray that you will kindly pity me and give me your letter or any other sign signifying your consent to our marriage. Sita was moved with her manner of address and requested Rama to comply with her request. Rama surveyed her from head to toe, and finding her eyeballs upside down, he knew that she was Shurpanaka in the form of a human being. Rama therefore said, I have no objection to give you my consent, but I shall write it on your back. How can you do it? Replied she. I feel bashful to show you my back. It does not matter, continued Rama. There is no one here. At last, Shurpanaka told Rama to write his consent on her back, which the latter wrote and sent her away. The demoness hastened to the place where Lakshmana was standing and said, You see, your brother has consented to our marriage with much pleasure. If you like, you may go and ask him about it. I am not a liar, you know. He has given me no letter or any sign, but he has simply told you to marry me. That will not do, replied Lakshmana. I must have a letter or sign from my brother signifying his consent to our marriage. Shurpanaka, having known his mind, showed the letter written by Rama on her back. The letter stated that as soon as Lakshmana read it, he should at once cut off the nose and ears of the demoness. Lakshmana read the letter and having seized her by her hair, flung her down and cut off her nose and ears as directed by Rama. When her nose and ears were thus cut off, she and her maidservants assumed their original forms and fled for fear of losing their lives, screaming hideously. Listening to her yells, Trishira, Kur, and Dushan came to help her with 14,000 demons. Look at my nose and ears, she said to them. There live three human beings, two males and one female. The man who called himself Lakshmana has disfigured me at the instigation of his brother and sister-in-law. You must now go there and cut off their heads, so that I may drink their blood and refresh myself with it. Trishira, Kur, and Dushan, having thought it below their dignity to go and fight with those human beings, selected 14 powerful demons and sent them to Panchavati with Shurpanaka. But Rama cut off their heads with one arrow. Shurpanaka fled in alarm and informed Trishira, Kur, and Dushan of what had happened, whereupon they marched against Rama with an army of demons, but they were also killed by the prince with his arrow in a moment. Shurpanaka fled to Lanka in consternation and showing her nose and ears to her brother Ravana, informed him that Trishira, Kur, and Dushan had been killed by Rama with 14,000 demons. Ravana was greatly alarmed at the sad news and having called upon his uncle Maricha, said to him, You see, Rama has killed Trishira, Kur, and Dushan and disfigured Shurpanaka. If this enemy is allowed to go unnoticed, he will even kill me one day or the other. I have, therefore, made up my mind to carry off Sita, his wife, to Lanka and kill Rama and Lakshmana. Please, therefore, be a beautiful Haran and frolic at the Parnakutika of Rama, and when he comes with his Dhanushban to kill you, run to the heart of the forest. Rama will pursue you, and as soon as he is separated from Sita, I shall carry her off to Lanka. It is sinful to covet one's wife, replied Maricha, and if you carry her off, you will lose your life and everything. I therefore advise you to change your mind and attend to your affairs." At this advice, Ravana got enraged and said, "It is a bad thing to advise me that way. It is your duty to help me on such occasions. I therefore command you to come with me and do what I tell you to do." Whereupon Maricha accompanied Ravana to Panchavati with the greatest reluctance. On their arrival, Ravana stood behind a thicket near the abode of Rama, and his uncle, forming himself into a stag, played tricks in front of it. Sita saw the stag and said to Rama, "Dearest, look at that stag. What a beautiful creature it is. I wish I would get its skin for my waistcoat. Please take this Dhanushban and kill it for me, so that I may have its skin for my waistcoat." To comply with the wishes of his wife, Rama took up his Dhanushban and aimed at the stag. The animal began to run, and Rama went after it. When he went far off from the Parnakutika, Ravana, who was standing behind the thicket unobserved, imitated the voice of Rama and cried out with a view to separate Lakshmana from Sita. "Lakshmana, help me! Lakshmana, help me! I am in distress." Sita heard this voice and said to Lakshmana in alarm, "Rama is in distress. I have just heard him cry out for help." "You need not be afraid," said Lakshmana. "None can hurt Rama. I am sure some demon has done the mischief with some bad motive." "Is this your affection towards your brother?" exclaimed Sita. "While Rama is actually in distress, you refuse to help him? Methinks you wish your brother's death and marry me after him." At this accusation, Lakshmana shed tears and, having drawn a line around the Parnakutika with his Dhanushban, said to her, "I am now going to help Rama. Look at this line. I beg you not to go behind it, and if you go, you will be in distress." So saying, Lakshmana left the Parnakutika with his Dhanushban, and when he went far off, Ravana disguised himself as a fakir, peeped at Sita through the door of the hut, and cried out in a plaintive tone, "Is there anybody in? I am a fakir here, and dying of hunger. It will be a great meritorious act if someone comes out and gives me something to eat." Who was full of kindness, came out and said, "Please sit down there. Rama will be presently here, and as soon as he comes, he will attend to your wants." "I shall not live until Rama comes here. If you now give me something to eat, I shall bless you." So saying, he threw himself on the ground and pretended to be worse. Sita was alarmed and left the line to give him succor, when Ravana immediately caught hold of her hand and said, "Do not be alarmed. I am Ravana, the king of Lanka. I am now being to take you to my kingdom. Quietly follow me." Sita rolled on the ground and violently cried, imploring him to leave her where she was. Her tears and entreaties did not move him in the least. He seated her in a chariot and set out for Lanka. Sita all the time cried aloud the name of Rama, which Jatayu heard and went to her rescue. "Ravana," said Jatayu, "I command you to set Sita at liberty, and if you disobey me, I shall instantly kill you." "Who are you?" replied Ravana. "What you has to do with this lady? You fool, go and mind your business." Jatayu insisted, and Ravana let off arrows at him. The bird cut off with his bill all the arrows of the demon king, broke the head of his charioteer, and killed his horses. Ravana alighted, when the bird pounced upon him and pulled off his hair. He was alarmed and stood there bewildered, not knowing what to do. The bird broke his chariot when the demon king said, "Speak the truth. Just tell me how you will die. I shall also tell you how I shall die." Jatayu, who was a simpleton, replied, "If you pull off my wings, I shall die instantly." "Now just tell me," continued Jatayu, "how you will die." If you break my toes, said Ravana, I shall die in no time. As soon as this secret was disclosed by Jatayu, Ravana went to catch him. The bird broke one of the toes of his enemy when the latter pulled off his wings. Jetayu, saturated with blood, fell there rolling, and the demon king, taking Sita on his shoulders, proceeded towards Lanka. When he reached the hills called Matang, five powerful monkeys, Sugriva, Nala, Nila, Jambavant, and Maruti, who lived there, found the ornaments thrown by Sita on the ground. Looking at the ornaments, Maruti said, Pity, some wicked demon must have been carrying off a poor woman. I shall kill the demon and rescue her. So saying, he jumped in the sky. But in the meantime, Ravana entered Lanka with his prize and dispatched 18 huge demons to search and kill Rama. A few days after his return to Lanka, the demon king said to Sita, I beseech you to marry me. I am very powerful and have made all the gods my slaves. There is not a single soul on earth who can equal me in wealth, strength, and valor. If you be my wife, you will be very happy. Thou art wicked and a villain, replied Sita. Thou wilt soon die. I shall never be thy wife. I loathe thee. Begone, thou fool. Having heard these words of Sita, Ravana said to himself, Sita is very excited, and unless she becomes calm, I shall not be able to win her heart. So saying to himself, he placed her in the Ashoka forest and posted 5 crores of demonesses with his sister Trijata as their head to watch her there with instructions to frighten her and make her marry him at any rate. The demonesses often showed their teeth and opened their hideous mouths as if they were going to devour her, but Sita was calm and did not heed them. Trijata, who was kind, encouraged her and told her not to frighten herself. Lakshmana joined Rama in the forest and informed him of what had passed between Sita and himself. Lakshmana wept and Rama pacified him. They then returned to Panchavati, and finding that Sita was not in the Parnakutika, they were alarmed and went in search of her. They could not find her. They then went to the Rishi Agasti, who informed them that Sita was carried off by Ravana. They returned to their abode and saw the footprints of the demon and Sita. They immediately set out in search of Sita in the forest. On the road, they met Jatayu, who informed them of what had happened. I, said Jatayu, mustered up all my strength and courage to rescue her from the wicked demon. But as soon as he cunningly knew my secret, he pulled off my wings and left me here in a dying state. So saying, Jatayu breathed his last. Rama grieved for him and performed the funeral ceremony of his death. The princesses proceeded on their journey. On the road, Parvati, the wife of Shiva, took the form of Sita and stood before him. But he did not receive her as he knew that she was Parvati. A little further on, a huge demon called Kabandh, stretching his arms for some 18 yojans and with his head separated from his trunk, sat in the forest. Rama, having found that he was a demon, cut off his arms and killed the monster on the spot. Kabandh was the son of Kashyapa, a rishi. One day he got drunk and frightened another rishi, Stulashira, who cursed him, saying that he would be a demon but that he would be released from the curse when Rama would kill him. As soon as he was killed by Rama, he assumed his original form and stood before him. That his head was separated by Indra from his body with his vajra, as he was performing a severe penance to enable him to take the kingdom of the god. On the road, Rama killed the 18 demons whom Ravana had sent and came to the Pampa Sarovar, where Rama and the Lakshmana sat down for rest under the shade of a banyan tree. From the hills, called Rishimukha, the five monkeys saw them. Sugriva was afraid and said, I think Vali, my brother, has sent those two warriors to kill me. So saying, he was to flee when Maruti said, Do not be afraid. I will ascertain who those warriors are. So saying, Maruti jumped upon the tree and, having plucked off the branches of it, threw them at Rama, who cut them off with his Dhanushbanas. Maruti then threw large stones and mountains at him, but he broke them in a minute and hurled the monkey in the air. His father, the wind, supported him while he was falling down and bade him worship Rama. He came down and, having thrown himself at the feet of the prince, implored his pardon, which was readily granted by him. He became a great devotee of Rama, and one day while he was shampooing the feet of the prince, he said to him, I shall be very glad to introduce you to Sugriva, brother of the king of this place, if you promise me that you will protect me. Just tell me who that Sugriva is, replied Rama. Whereupon Maruti related the story of the life of Sugriva, which is as follows. One day, while Brahmadev was performing a penance, a drop of his tears fell on his hand, and it bore a king called Raksharaj. He was a monkey. While he was going from forest to forest, he came to a river called Kayalasa, the kingdom of Shiva. He bathed in the river, but immediately after he became a very beautiful female. It was appointed by Parvati, wife of Shiva, that any man who would bathe in the river would be a female. Indra and the sun were enamored by the woman. By Indra she got Vali, and Sugriva by the sun. Having heard that Raksharaj became a female, Brahmadev came to the river and prayed to Parvati to restore his son to his former form. Parvati listened to his prayer and made Raksharaj a man again. The god then created a country called Kishkinda and gave it to him. Raksharaj ruled in the country for some time, and having placed his eldest son Vali on the throne, proceeded to heaven. Vali and Sugriva lived together and loved each other. Vali was very powerful and invincible, as he was presented by Indra with Vijayamala. After some time, both the brothers became mortal enemies, and Vali carried off his beautiful wife Rama. For fear of his brother, Sugriva made his abode on the hills called Rishimukha Parvat. They both fought together every 6 months. Rama bade Maruti tell Sugriva that he would kill Vali and restore his wife to him. Maruti immediately went to Sugriva and asked to him, You are in grief for your wife, so also Rama for his wife Sita. Rama has promised to help you in recovering your wife, and you will have to help him also in recovering his wife Sita. Sugriva was glad at what Maruti had told him and set out with his army of monkeys to see Rama. On his arrival, the prince cordially received Sugriva and told him all about Sita. Sugriva said that yesterday he heard screams of a woman and showed the ornaments found by the monkeys to Rama. The prince identified the ornaments as belongings to his wife and shed tears when Sugriva said, Do not be afraid. I shall help you with my able ministers Nala, Nila, and Jambavant in recovering Sita from Ravana. Let us kill Vali first, and then we shall set out in search of Sita. As soon as Sugriva spoke these words, Rama aimed his arrow when the former stopped him and said, Vali is my mortal enemy and will fight with us to his last gap. Whereupon Rama asked him the cause of the enmity with his brother.